There are places you go for comfort, a familiar taste, a simple pleasure. Dunkin' Donuts is supposed to be one of those places, a beacon of dependable, sugary goodness. But not this one. No. This one was different. It was a place where hope went to die, one stale donut at a time. I walked in, seeking the simple joy of a classic glazed. The air was thick, heavy. It carried a scent I couldn't quite place, something vaguely savory, deeply unsettling. I should have turned back then. My instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity, that cruel mistress, held me captive. I had to see. I had to know. I ordered the glazed donut. It sat there, under the harsh fluorescent lights, looking almost normal. Almost. There was a sheen to its glaze that wasn't quite right, a certain lumpiness. It looked less like a sweet confection and more like a science experiment gone horribly wrong. The kid behind the counter slid it onto a piece of wax paper with a grunt. He didn't make eye contact. Nobody here made eye contact. It's a survival mechanism, I suspect. Looking too closely might reveal truths you aren't prepared to face. I took the donut to a sticky table, my shoes making a peeling sound with every step. The moment of truth arrived. I lifted the donut to my mouth. The smell hit me first. Not sugar, not yeast. Ranch. A powerful, unmistakable wave of ranch dressing. My brain recoiled in confusion. Was this some new avant-garde flavor combination I hadn't heard of? A bold culinary statement? I took a bite. The texture was all wrong. It was tough, leathery, like it had been sitting out since the Carter administration. And the taste. Oh, the taste. It was an unholy union of stale dough, old sugar, and the pungent, creamy tang of ranch. Someone, somewhere, had made a terrible, terrible mistake. My taste buds screamed in protest. This wasn't just a bad donut. This was an act of aggression, a culinary crime scene. I looked back at the donut rack. I saw a Boston cream that seemed to be weeping, a jelly donut that had a suspicious brown stain spreading from its center. It became clear. The ranch wasn't a mistake. It was cross-contamination, a symptom of a much larger disease festering within these walls. This place wasn't just serving bad food. It was a monument to profound, soul-crushing failure. My quest for a simple treat had led me to the heart of darkness. My journey into this abyss of despair was far from over. I needed to see how deep the rot went. The bathroom beckoned. It was a siren's call to a shipwreck. The door was smeared with something unidentifiable. I pushed it open, and a wave of ammonia and something far worse assaulted my senses. The floor was a mosaic of questionable liquids and dirt. A single, flickering bulb cast long, monstrous shadows across the walls. The scene was straight out of a horror film. It was the kind of place where you make your peace with God before you even step inside. Every surface seemed to be coated in a thin, greasy film. The sink was a horror show. A permanent ring of grime circled the drain, which was clogged with a dark, hairy mass. The faucet dripped a rusty-looking water, creating a slow, rhythmic torture against the stained porcelain. The soap dispenser was empty, its plastic surface sticky to the touch. The mirror above it was so clouded with filth and streaked with grime that it barely reflected a distorted, ghostly image. It was a mercy, really. I didn't want to see my own face in this place. Seeing my reflection here would feel like looking at a man who had made a series of very poor life choices, starting with entering this establishment. Then, my eyes fell upon the toilet. It sat in the corner like a malevolent throne. It had no seat, just the cold, stained porcelain bowl. The water inside was a shade of brown that did not occur in nature. It was a testament to neglect, a silent scream into the void. The walls of the stall were a canvas of despair, covered in graffiti and strange dark splotches. The air was so thick, so foul, that breathing felt like a conscious effort. I backed out slowly, careful not to touch anything. I felt like I needed a shower, a long, scalding shower, and possibly a priest. This wasn't just uncleanliness. This was a complete and utter breakdown of civilization. It was a willful surrender to decay. To walk out of that bathroom was to be reborn. To feel the slightly less foul air of the main dining area was like breathing the crisp mountain air of the Alps. The experience recalibrated my entire understanding of the word dirty. I had seen things in kitchens around the world. I had eaten in places that would make a health inspector weep. But this bathroom? This was a new level of hell. This was a place that sanitation forgot. The source of this decay wasn't hard to find. It was standing right behind the counter. The staff moved with a slowness that defied the laws of physics. They were a study in apathy. Their uniforms, once a crisp brown and orange, were now a Jackson Pollock painting of grease, coffee, and despair. One employee, a teenager with headphones in, was leaning against the coffee machine, eyes glazed over, bobbing his head to a silent beat. He hadn't moved in the 10 minutes I'd been there. He was a statue dedicated to not giving a damn. Another was on his phone, scrolling endlessly with a greasy thumb. Their hygiene was a chilling spectacle. I watched one of them handle money, then immediately grab a handful of munchkins with his bare hands. No gloves, no tongs, no semblance of food safety. He tossed them into a bag with the same enthusiasm one might have for taking out the trash. It was a transaction devoid of care. A customer before me complained his coffee was cold. The employee took the cup, zapped it in a filthy microwave for 10 seconds, and slammed it back on the counter without a word. The customer just sighed, defeated, and walked away. This was the system. Resistance was futile. I asked to speak to a manager. I was curious what kind of leader would preside over such a kingdom of filth. One of the employees gestured vaguely towards an office in the back. The door was ajar. I peered inside. A man in a stained polo shirt was asleep in a chair, his feet up on a desk littered with invoices and old food wrappers. He was snoring, loudly. This was the captain of the ship, sound asleep while his vessel sank slowly into a sea of grime and customer disappointment. The negligence wasn't an accident. It was policy. It flowed from the top down, a waterfall of pure indifference. And then, I saw it. A movement in the corner of my eye. From the kitchen. A rat. Not a small, timid mouse. A big, bold, New York City subway-sized rat. It scurried from behind a stack of boxes, grabbed a fallen donut hole, and disappeared back into the shadows. It moved with a confidence that told me it was a regular. It was probably on the payroll. The staff didn't even flinch. They had seen it all. They were numb to it. The rats weren't pests, they were roommates. At that moment, the ranch-flavored donut made perfect sense. This wasn't a restaurant. It was a biosphere. The dining area itself was a masterclass in misery. Every table was sticky. Not just a little sticky. It was a deep, archaeological stickiness, built up in layers over years of neglect. Spilled coffee, melted frosting, and the ghosts of meals long past had combined to create a surface that could trap a small insect for eternity. The chairs were wobbly, many with rips in the upholstery, leaking a sad gray foam. To sit in one was to accept the possibility that it might collapse under you, sending you crashing to the filthy floor. It was a gamble with every coffee break. The floor was a map of past accidents. Dark stains marked where coffee had been spilled and never properly cleaned. Crushed food items were ground into the tiles, becoming a permanent part of the decor. A lonely crushed napkin lay under a table, looking like it had been there for weeks. The trash cans were overflowing. A mountain of cups, wrappers, and half-eaten pastries spilled onto the floor around them. The smell was a potent mix of sour milk, old sugar, and general decay. It was an environment that actively attacked the senses, making it impossible to enjoy anything you might attempt to eat or drink. The walls, painted a once cheerful orange and pink, were now faded and stained. Brown streaks ran down from the ceiling in several places, evidence of leaks that had been ignored. The cheerful posters advertising new seasonal drinks were curled and yellowed, relics of a happier, cleaner time. One poster for a pumpkin spice latte was still up. It was almost Thanksgiving of 2025. This wasn't just neglect. It was a time capsule of apathy. The air conditioning vents were caked with a thick layer of black dust, which probably rained down a fine mist of filth every time the system kicked on. So here's my advice. A warning from a man who has stared into the abyss. If you are ever driving through a forgotten corner of America and you see a Dunkin' Donuts that looks a little too quiet, a little too dark, keep driving. Do not stop. Do not let your curiosity or your craving for a simple coffee lure you in. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Some donuts are not meant to be eaten. This place is a cautionary tale. A reminder that even the most familiar comforts can curdle into something truly horrifying. Avoid it at all costs. Your stomach and your soul will thank you.